Welcome to Under Oath. Today we have a promoting executive, record executive, finder of great talent, and a musician himself, Derek Shulman. How you doing, Derek?
I'm doing great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Every time I get to interview somebody like you, I can't imagine that moment when you walk into a bar and you're listening, hoping to find that sound, going, okay, I like these guys.
It usually doesn't happen that way, but because most of the bands in bars are playing other people's music, so that's a whole different thing. But there's a lot of great music out there, which unfortunately is not being heard, which is tragic because it's such a different time and place these days than it was in the 80s, 90s, and aughts. So it's to get through and become a big band as opposed to in the popular and rock music world. Yeah.
I think about the tough spot a guy like you used to be in, where you're going, wow, they sound great, but they look like crap. And I mean, there has to be some kind of divide where you're going, okay, I've got the best of both worlds.
Oh, yeah. Well, the key thing I speak about is that the band is authentic in whatever genre they're in, whether it's pop or rock or metal or even hip hop. I mean, I'll just include that or whatever world they're in, as long as they are doing something which is their own and not somebody else's. Whether it's I signed Dream Theater and they're completely different to a Bon Jovi, who are completely different to Pantera, who are completely different to Nickelback. But they're doing something which other bands are not doing. They're leaders and not followers. And that's the key to ultimate success and a career, basically.
Now, for
You
you,
know, Gentle Giant was the same way, effectively.
I mean, you had 10 years, you got to work with your brothers. What was the moment where you go, you know what? I'm done with this. I've got to move on.
Probably the last couple of years, we were the creative juices were starting to dwindle, and radio itself was starting to become, it was an important facet in marketing, and they started playing hit songs as opposed to hit album tracks and the hit singles, and bands like I guess a Genesis or yes would be able to write a 3-minute song. We weren't able to, and in certain respects I'm glad we didn't, because we may have become our own tribute band, and I really would have hated that for Gentle Giant to do that, because I see these bands and one band drops out and then another band member drops out, and they become kind of like an older band that is trying to get your 40-inch waist into a 32-inch waist some years later. So I'm glad in many ways that we called it a day while we were on top, and I moved into a completely different, not so different, but different field in music.
Do you remember that moment where you're going, where I don't know whether the group got together or you just woke up in bed one day and goes, yeah, I'm not feeling this anymore.
Yeah, at the end of well, yes, when we recorded Civilian, which we thought was a really good album, and we recorded it in California, and Columbia Records said that they were going to re-push it, and we went on the road in North America, and for whatever reason, it didn't work. And there's a time when you say, look, you can only do so much, so at a certain point, and then the returns start to diminish. Your audiences dwindle a little bit. You start playing smaller places, and we didn't want that to happen. We said, look, we're playing great. We did the last tour, and before that tour, we said, this is the last tour, and we had a lot of fun. There was no animosity. There wasn't any argument. We just played our last tour, and then we went off on our own and did different things. My brother became a producer, et cetera, et cetera. So we went on to different careers. But those 10 years are when I look back, and I look back with my book, were probably the best 10 years I've ever had in my life.
You think about, I read books all the time where we kind of romanticize times where you're going, wow, that was the best day of my life. And we only try to think of the good times. I mean, what was the most difficult thing about being on the road?
There are so many difficult things that you have to encounter. There transportation. You get no sleep. You're playing back to back. You're playing with bands. As a backup initially that give you no room on the stage. Um, but generally it's a different lifestyle than obviously being an executive, but it's a lifestyle that you can create. You can go you can play, do your own thing. It's yours, it's nobody else's. And you go in the studio and it's your creation. It's not no one else's. You go onto the stage and it's your show, it's your creation. So that's something that you can't replicate on any other business or any other lifestyle.
I'm gonna ask a tough question because, I grew up at a time where, I worked with bands and everything, and we'd be in the studio for hours and hours and hours, and you just hope to get it. Now we have auto tune where you don't have to get it, where somebody doesn't have to be as talented as we'd like them to be. How painful is that for you now where you go, hey, listen, it's just part of our world now?
Well, I mean, it doesn't pain me so much as make me sad that when we started, and this is before General Giant, I was in another band at school, and then we were very successful. But we worked our asses off. We do 10 or 11 gigs a week, and if you didn't do that, and you didn't realize, and you didn't progress and become good at your instrument and good at what you did, then you didn't have a lifestyle or career in music. But we did. We learned stagecraft. We learned about writing. We learned about being entertainers as well as musicians. So when we became General Giant, we had that in our back pockets, and I think that served us very well. So hard work. I mean, we worked 24/7, and became as good as we could be, both professionally, both as musicians, and also entertainers on stage. And we didn't let anything get in the way. And we did it for ourselves first, but we wanted, hopefully, an audience that would enjoy us afterwards.
Now, you just mentioned something entertainers in comparison to, I don't want to compare entertainers to musicians, but we do know that there's been a flip that we're more likely looking for a guy who can look good and dance than maybe somebody who can create music. When do you think that flip happened, or do you think it's always been that way?
No, no, it's just been recently when the show, if you like, the show became the show rather than the musician playing the show with embellishments. That's a whole different animal. You have to, when I actually saw a show 2 nights ago, and but it was actually it was Yes, actually that and I know those guys very very well. They're good friends of mine, and thankfully they did not have hard drives. They didn't have auto tune, and they played really really well, and I was very surprised and happy to hear that they were playing as well as they did, which that of course I've seen other bands that really don't play very well, but it sounds great because it's all on, again, all on computers and hard drives and God knows what else in there. Their stage shows flames and sparks and dancers and God knows what else, and it's fun to look at. But musically, it's I don't know what the word is. Musically, it's like watching a fireworks show and November the 5th in England.
You mentioned that, and I think of the opportunity, like Yes had some iconic songs and that haunt you for 30, 40 years. I don't see anybody out there who's creating something that's going to haunt me 40 years from now.
That's I I agree with you. In fact, I think that's very sad that the artists of yesteryear. I mean, we're talking about, if you talk about, yes, or Gentle Giant. In fact, I'm talking about this. It's still as popular, if not more popular, than it was back in the day, and that shows that the music that we played has some value and has a legacy to it that doesn't age, if you like. Um, and I think that a lot of the bands or music these days is pretty much programmed actually into computer logs and analytics, and that's, that's sad. And I don't want to predict, but I would think that um, quite a lot of it will not be remembered in 5 to 10 years, or even less. I mean, maybe I think there's probably a handful of artists, perhaps, in 20 to 30 years, will be remembered during this last 20 plus years of technology getting in the way of musicianship, if you like.
Technology is painful. I mean, I was watching some software, some AI software, and I put in a couple prompts and it spit out a full song. I mean, complete. I was thinking to myself, would I be able to tell the difference? You know, I mean, do you think you could tell the difference between something created on AI and somebody created? Would it be the flaws that you notice, or would it be this is too perfect?
Yeah, I would notice a difference. Of course, there's a difference. There's nothing. AI technology can never replace something which is human, and you open a page and it's blank, and you start writing from there, and from there. Your heart, your gut, and your head. And AI does not have that. It has the information from your gut, your heart, and your head, but it doesn't have the synapses that you have personally. So absolutely, it's always different. Of course it is.
Now, I can't imagine you trying to do your job now in comparison to, when you discovered Bon Jovi. You're just going, what am I shooting for? Am I shooting for talent? Am I shooting for a look? I mean, am I hoping that he's that good looking that, he'll be able to tour with Taylor Swift? I mean, stuff like that. I can't even imagine what it would be like doing your job right now.
With John, that was a whole different animal, because I met John as he was putting a band together, and he had a vision of himself that was unstoppable. He sat down with me the band was getting together, and I said, John, what is it you want to be, and who is it you want to be? And he was 18 years old, and I was just a little older, and he looked me in the eye and he said, I want to be as big, if not bigger, than Elvis. And you wonder, if is he punking me, but I could tell with his eyes and with his heart and with his, he was that driven to learn and be, certainly, well, I don't know, as big as Elvis, but certainly as well known as he became. And in fact, I saw that in him, and effectively helped him on his way to, on the third album. Of course, I got him together with Desmond Child, and got him to Vancouver, and we made Slippery When Wet, and John Bon Jovi, or Bon Jovi the band, became the biggest band that year, 1986. So, but he had that vision and drive and the ability to learn how to make himself an entertainer and star. He was a star. He had that, and again, and he authentically knew that that was what he wanted to be.
One of the hardest questions I ask now for people is I go to a lot of shows now. I still go. I'm still, the hard thing for me is to see an artist who shouldn't be on stage anymore. They bring him in a wheelchair, or something like that, and it's just painful. And they have some backup singers who are doing his parts. I mean, are you happy to see that, or are you like going, he should definitely not do this?
Truthfully, I'm in your court. To be honest
Yeah.
with you, I just don't feel like, look. I can't speak for the artist. Look, whatever they want to do and whatever their fans want to see is okay for me, or okay for them. But for me, I just can't. I don't feel right in seeing a band that I have incredible memories from back in the day, trying to recreate it in a different era when you really can't do it, and you can't reach those notes, you can't play those licks on your guitar, and you're allowing other people to do it just because I don't know what it is. If it's money, I understand that, but if it's just the ego of being on stage and having an audience clap, that's I think that's sad, to be perfectly honest.
That's a tough thing, I think about a couple different things when you try to process all of this. And one of the things that's tough for me is when an artist dies early, when somebody is ridiculously talented and he leaves this planet, and you've had so many different talented people under you. What was one of your biggest shock when a certain artist died? What was the one where you're going, oh man, we have lost so much?
Um, oh boy, there's several. Well, Jimi Hendrix, because we actually, in my first group, we toured Germany with Jimi Hendrix, and in my first group, Simon Dupree and the Big Sound, and we had a pretty big hit, and we were really good. I'm being very honest here. We were great live, and not too many people, too many other bands could top us. But we did this tour of Germany, and when Jimi Hendrix Experience went on, we said, okay, they win. They hit. He was that good. He was that good. I mean, it was just, he was brilliant. And also a great, great guy and such a pleasant, unbelievable man. And we thought this is just an incredible talent that is unbeatable. And when he passed away, it was so sad that his, no, he would no longer be seen because he was very young, another 27-year-old that didn't see his his career blossom into bigger things. But yeah, Hendrix was probably one, the main one.
We've got a minute left, so why don't we just tell people how they can get your book? Because I think if you're an artist or you want to achieve anything, I think this book will help you get there.
Well, you go to Amazon.com, and it's the book is called Giant Steps. You could get it on Kindle now, but it's out in a couple of weeks on Amazon. And I hope everyone enjoys it because it was quite hard to make, and it was very personal, by the way. It's not just about my life in music. It's about my life, and it's about family, and it's about also staying away from things that will make you less good in music. I'm talking about chemicals and alcohol that people rely on. They think that they are helping, but I never did any of that stuff, and I'm very happy that I'm an old man that could talk about that, if you like, and saying thank goodness I didn't.
Well, it was great talking to you, Derek, and I look forward to talking to you again. Be well, my friend.
Thanks very much, man.